happy New Year. Really glad you're here, but I hate to start off the year on this story. I can't trust the media at all, really with anything, but particularly with what's going on right now as we speak in Iraq. Remember, we're just coming out of killing Baghdadi, and the Washington Post called him an austere religious scholar. We already have the New York Times talking about these, at best we'll call them protesters, and we'll get to this in a second, but we have them calling them mourners, Iraqi mourners attacking our embassy right now. So I can't trust these guys at all out of sheer bias, and at best, just ignorance, just reporters not knowing anything about what's going on there. So of all the people that we could talk to about this, the man I trust the most, who understands this not only as academically as well as anyone, but emotionally better than anyone, is Mark Geist, who is one of the heroes of Benghazi. Oz, how are you, brother? Good to talk to you.
Hey, it's great being on. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Man, as I said, I'm really, really excited to hear. So where to begin? I feel like we're going to bounce around, right, between what's going on in Iraq and your experience in Benghazi. Let's start with what you understand in Iraq right now. Who are the players involved? Who do we need to understand, and what are their motivations?
Well, you know, and I've spent, during my contracting time, I spent probably 6 years in Iraq. Part of it was as a security advisor with Dr. Ayad Alawi, who was one of the former prime ministers of Iraq as well. You know, it's convoluted over there. The government has been infiltrated by the Iranian supporters, I guess is the best way to put it. You know, the militias that are backed by Iran. Iraq, for the longest time, has been led by the Sunnis until after the war, and now it's the Shias. And I think there's a lot of the dichotomy that causes the problems that's going on in Iraq right now, because they're really divided down those lines of Shia and Sunni. And traditionally, the Shia have been the larger population, but the Sunnis were put in charge for the longest of times. And now it's the Sunnis, the Shias coming back and one, getting retribution for that, two, Iran trying to push their influence into that government really heavy.
Let's hit on that. So what's Iran's role in the region as you see it, and why and how they're getting involved with Iraqi politics?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do, you know, if you go back to the first World War I, when the lines were actually drawn in the sand in the Middle East of what was where, and that's where the separation of the Persian Empire, which was Iran, and you had the biggest Sunni group, which was Saudi Arabia, and Iraq, or the Mesopotamia region, was kind of that buffer region, and that's why the Sunnis were put in charge from Western powers at that time. You know, some of the players you have there are the Kitab Hezbollah, which is the Hezbollah Brigade, is what it translates into, which is the militia that was protesting, so to speak, as you said, mourning and protesting against the U.S. Involvement there. And really, they are one of the smaller groups total, in total population, trying to just push their power there. I think the government was kind of supporting it in a roundabout way.
So when you say the government, you mean the Iranian government?
The Iranian government, for sure, and in a placid way, even the Iraqi government letting them do that, because, you know, they're in a precarious situation as well. They have to balance themselves between America and Iran. Iran's their next door neighbor. They have a lot of trade that goes with them, so they're trying to balance that as well.
Jeez. Okay, so based on your understanding, what happened at least the first day of the protest? And what do you want to call these guys? Do you want to call them militants, protesters? What do you think's a fair?
Well, you know, and I'll call them protesters because, you know, they were, I guess maybe I don't know if it's the right word, kind enough not to bring weapons. You know, they didn't as a protest would be. I mean, they come in there, there's no weapons, there's no, they came in during the day when a protest typically would happen, unlike in Benghazi. You know, most of the protesters in Benghazi, or the quasi-protesters, were armed with AK-47s, belt-fed machine guns, and RPGs, and they came at 9, 10 o'clock at night.
Wow.
You don't
Okay,
get
that's an important distinction. Okay. Yeah, that's really important. Okay, so what did these guys do? What did these protesters do to our embassy? Let's say day one.
Well, I think the whole thing started under the muse of mourning and of the and I don't mean any disrespect to them in that sense, but it's typical that they're going to gather their militia together. They're going to gather the supporters of the militia, and they, as they're marching or as they're mourning the death of the 25 militants that were killed in the rocket attack after the attack on a U.S. Iraqi base where a contractor was killed, a private contractor was killed, a U.S. citizen, and several people were injured. I think even some U.S. military personnel. Well,
wow. Okay, this is super important. So first of all, let me cut you off there. Sorry, Mark.
Yep.
So this is so good. I love talking because I love how you went back to World War I, right? Like that's the beginning of the giant geopolitical analysis. But even in this micro analysis here, so when was that attack on that military base that you think
that was
sparked all
last
this?
week. That was last week is
okay.
when that happened, and we retaliated almost immediately.